Trapped. Chapter 1. The Last Goodbye. Sarah Benson's nerves were frayed as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, elongated shadows over the quiet suburban street. Her heart raced with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Tonight was supposed to be different, supposed to be the night she would confront the secrets that had been tormenting her for years. Instead, she found herself ensnared in a web of deceit, with no clear path to escape. Her small living room, usually a sanctuary of calm, felt oddly claustrophobic. The familiar hum of her neighborhood seemed conspicuously absent, replaced by an unsettling silence that only amplified her anxiety. She glanced anxiously at the clock. 7 p.m. The hour of reckoning was fast approaching. A sudden knock on the door made her jump. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves before opening it. Standing on her doorstep was Detective Mike Carter, his expression grim and serious. The sight of him sent a shiver down her spine. They had a complicated history, one fraught with unresolved tension and unspoken words. "Sarah," Mike said, his voice low and filled with concern. "We need to talk." Her mind raced as she let him inside. The last time they had spoken was under very different circumstances, and now, with the shadows growing longer, the stakes felt higher. She led him to the living room, where they sat in silence for a moment before she finally broke the quiet. "I assume this isn't just a social visit," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Mike nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a piercing intensity. "No, it's not. I have reason to believe that the case we've been working on, the one that disappeared from the headlines months ago, is far from over. In fact, it's only just beginning." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The case he referred to was the disappearance of her brother, Tom, who had vanished without a trace a year ago. The investigation had stalled, and the media had lost interest. Sarah had been left to grapple with her own fears and uncertainties. "What's changed?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mike leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "We found something that could change everything. But I need your help to understand it. It's tied to Tom's disappearance, and it's bigger than we thought." As he spoke, Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. The prospect of digging up old wounds was daunting, but the possibility of finally finding answers about Tom was irresistible. She nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. "Tell me what you need." Mike handed her a folder, thick with documents and photographs. "These are new leads, evidence we've recently uncovered. It's going to take all our wits to piece this together." Sarah opened the folder, her eyes scanning the contents. Among the papers was a photo of a nondescript warehouse, its windows obscured by grime. She felt a pang of recognition but couldn't place why. The rest of the evidence was cryptic and fragmented, adding to the growing sense of urgency. "I don't understand," she said, frustration mounting. "How does this connect to Tom?" Mike sighed. "I wish I had all the answers. What I do know is that someone is trying to cover up something significant. We need to act quickly before the trail goes cold." The weight of the situation settled heavily on Sarah's shoulders. The familiar feeling of being trapped in a maze of half-truths and misleading clues was back. The peace she had longed for seemed further away than ever. But now, with Mike's presence and the new evidence, she felt a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. As they began to examine the evidence, Sarah felt the weight of her brother's disappearance press heavily upon her. Each piece of information, each photograph, seemed to pull her further into a maze of intrigue and danger. The warehouse photo was particularly troubling. Its very anonymity spoke volumes about the secrecy surrounding Tom's case. "You said this is bigger than we thought?" Sarah said, her voice tinged with both fear and determination. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Mike's gaze was steady. "I can't say for certain yet, but there are indications that Tom's disappearance is connected to a larger conspiracy. We're not just looking at a missing persons case. We're dealing with something that could involve several people and possibly even organized crime. Sarah's heart sank. The idea of organized crime being involved was terrifying. It meant that Tom's disappearance might be part of something much darker and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mike looked at the photographs scattered across the table. "We start by following the leads we have. We need to determine if there's a pattern or connection between these pieces of evidence. The warehouse might be a good place to start. It could hold clues about what happened to Tom or who might be responsible." As the evening wore on, Sarah and Mike pored over the evidence. The atmosphere in the room was tense, filled with the low murmur of their voices and the rustling of papers. The clues were like fragments of a shattered mirror, reflecting bits of a larger, more complex picture. Each new discovery seemed to lead them further into a labyrinth of uncertainty. The clock on the wall ticked away the minutes, each second bringing them closer to the heart of the mystery. Sarah's initial anxiety had transformed into a steely resolve. She knew that this was not just about finding her brother anymore. It was about uncovering the truth and facing the shadows of a dark conspiracy. By the time Mike finally gathered the documents and prepared to leave, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but she was determined to follow it wherever it might lead. "Tomorrow," Mike said as he headed for the door, "we'll start early. There's a lot to be done, and time is of the essence." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing with the possibilities. As Mike left, she stood by the door, staring into the darkness outside. The feeling of being trapped had never been so palpable, but within that entrapment, she found a flicker of hope. The truth was out there, and she was ready to uncover it. Chapter 2. The Hidden Clues. Sarah woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose that cut through the fog of exhaustion. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind like a relentless loop, fueling her determination to uncover the truth about Tom's disappearance. As she prepared for the day, the weight of the evidence in the folder seemed to grow heavier, pressing on her like an invisible burden. The early morning air was crisp and cool as Sarah stepped outside, a welcome contrast to the anxiety that had gripped her the night before. She drove to the address Mike had given her, a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building loomed ahead, its dilapidated state speaking volumes about years of neglect. When Sarah arrived, she found Mike waiting for her, his demeanor serious as ever. He was already examining the exterior of the warehouse, his eyes scanning for any signs of activity or recent changes. Sarah approached him, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Mike glanced at her and nodded. "Morning. Are you ready for this?" Sarah took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They walked towards the warehouse, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty space. The building's large metal door was partially ajar, as if inviting them in. Mike pulled out a flashlight and motioned for Sarah to follow him inside. The interior of the warehouse was dimly lit, with shafts of sunlight piercing through the grimy windows. Dust motes floated in the air, dancing in the beams of light. The place smelled of rust and decay, a testament to its abandonment. The floor was littered with debris, broken crates, old machinery, and scattered papers. Mike directed their attention to a corner of the warehouse where several large boxes were stacked haphazardly. He carefully began to open them, revealing their contents. More photographs, documents, and various items that seemed to have been hastily discarded. Sarah picked up a photograph from one of the boxes. It was a grainy image of a man she didn't recognize, standing in front of what looked like an office building. Next to it was a handwritten note with a list of names and dates. The names were unfamiliar, but the dates were recent, and one of them caught her eye: Tom's disappearance date. "Why would these items be here?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with confusion and curiosity. Mike examined the photograph closely, These look like they were part of someone's investigation, maybe even the person who was trying to cover up Tom's disappearance. This warehouse might have been a safe house or a storage facility for crucial evidence. As they continued to sift through the boxes, Sarah's sense of urgency grew. Each new discovery seemed to piece together a larger puzzle, but the complete picture remained frustratingly out of reach. Among the documents, they found a series of encrypted messages and a detailed map of the city with several locations marked in red. "This map could be significant," Mike said, pointing to the locations. "They might be places we need to investigate further. But first, we need to decipher these messages." Sarah nodded in agreement. The thought of decrypting the messages added another layer of complexity to their task, but she was determined to follow every lead. The sense of being trapped in a web of deception was overwhelming, but the chance to finally find answers about Tom pushed her forward. Mike glanced at his watch. "Let's get this back to the lab and see if we can make any sense of it. We'll need to work quickly. The sooner we can decrypt these messages, the sooner we might uncover the next piece of the puzzle." They carefully packed the documents and photographs into a bag and made their way back to the car. The drive to the lab was filled with a tense silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. The warehouse had revealed more questions than answers, and Sarah knew that the road ahead would be challenging. Back at the lab, they set up a workspace and began the painstaking process of analyzing the documents. Mike worked on decrypting the messages while Sarah examined the photographs and the map, trying to find any additional clues. Hours passed in focused concentration, the only sounds being the clicking of keyboards and the occasional murmur of conversation. As the evening approached, Mike finally managed to decipher one of the messages. It was a list of locations with instructions to visit them at specific times. One of the locations was a park on the edge of town, marked with the note "Meeting Point." "This could be where we find more information," Mike said, his eyes reflecting the dim light of the computer screen. "It might be worth checking out." Sarah agreed, her heart racing with anticipation. The park could hold the key to understanding the full scope of the conspiracy surrounding Tom's disappearance. They made plans to visit the park the following morning, hoping that it would provide the breakthrough they needed. As Sarah left the lab that night, she felt a renewed sense of determination. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but she was more committed than ever to uncovering the truth. The feeling of being trapped was still present, but with each clue they uncovered, she felt a glimmer of hope. She knew that the journey was far from over, and that the real challenge lay in navigating the treacherous waters of deception and danger. But with Mike by her side and the clues beginning to come together, Sarah was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 3. The Park Rendezvous. The park was eerily quiet as Sarah and Mike arrived the next morning. It was a sprawling green space with neatly trimmed lawns and well-maintained pathways, but today it felt ominously still. The early morning mist hung low over the park, adding an extra layer of mystery to their search. Mike parked the car near the entrance, and they walked towards the designated meeting point. A small, secluded gazebo tucked away in a corner of the park. The structure, covered in creeping ivy, was surrounded by dense foliage, making it an ideal place for clandestine meetings. As they approached the gazebo, Sarah's senses were on high alert. The feeling of being watched was palpable, and every rustle of leaves or distant sound made her jump. Mike, too, seemed tense, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of activity. They reached the gazebo and paused, surveying their surroundings. The spot was isolated, providing a perfect vantage point for anyone who wanted to observe from a distance. Sarah's heart raced as she took in the scene, trying to steady her nerves. "This is the place," Mike said quietly, his voice carrying an edge of anticipation. "Let's see if there's anything here that could give us a clue." They began to search the area, meticulously examining the floor of the gazebo and the surrounding grass. Sarah's eyes fell on a small, inconspicuous object partially hidden beneath a loose plank. She knelt down and carefully pried it loose. It was a tiny, black USB drive. "Look at this," Sarah said, holding it up for Mike to see. "It must have been left here deliberately." Mike took the USB drive and examined it closely. This could be significant. It might contain crucial information or evidence related to Tom's disappearance. They returned to the car and plugged the USB drive into their laptop, eager to see what it contained. The drive was encrypted, and they had to use specialized software to access its contents. After several tense minutes of waiting, the files began to load. The USB drive contained a series of video files, each labeled with a date and time. Sarah and Mike watched the first video, which showed a grainy surveillance footage of the park. The video was time-stamped a few days before Tom's disappearance, and it showed a shadowy figure moving through the park, seemingly on a covert mission. "This could be the person who was watching Tom," Mike said, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and concern. "We need to identify who this is and see if we can connect them to the case." The subsequent videos on the USB drive were equally disturbing. They depicted various locations around the city, with the same shadowy figure appearing at different times. The footage was meticulous, suggesting a level of planning and surveillance that went beyond the norm. As they watched, Sarah noticed something peculiar in one of the videos. The figure was entering a building that looked familiar, a tall, unremarkable office building in the city's business district. The building had been in one of the marked locations on the map they found at the warehouse. "This building was on the map," Sarah said, pointing to the screen. "It could be another key location." Mike nodded, his expression serious. "We need to investigate this building. It might be where the answers we're looking for are hidden." They made their way to the office building, their senses heightened as they approached. The building was modern and well-maintained, with a sleek glass facade that reflected the morning sun. It seemed innocuous enough, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was happening inside. They entered the building's lobby and approached the receptionist. Mike flashed his badge, explaining that they were conducting an investigation and needed to speak with someone who might have information about recent activities in the building. The receptionist directed them to the building manager's office on the top floor. As they rode the elevator, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. The manager might be able to provide information about tenants or activities that could be linked to Tom's case. When they arrived at the manager's office, they were greeted by a middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed beard and a professional demeanor. His name was Mr. Harris, and he seemed wary of their presence. "How can I help you?" Mr. Harris asked, his voice polite but guarded. Mike introduced themselves and explained the nature of their investigation. "We're looking into a case involving someone who might have been seen in this building. We need to know if you've noticed anything unusual, or if you can provide any information about recent tenants or visitors." Mr. Harris appeared thoughtful, his brows furrowing as he considered their request. "We've had a few new tenants recently, but I don't have any specific information about their activities. I can check our records and see if there's anything that stands out." Sarah and Mike thanked Mr. Harris and waited while he reviewed the records. The minutes seemed to drag on, each second adding to their mounting sense of urgency. Finally, Mr. Harris returned with a set of records in hand. "I found something that might be of interest. There was a tenant who recently moved in under a temporary lease. Their name is John Smith, but I don't have any contact information for him." Mike and Sarah exchanged glances. "Do you know if John Smith is still in the building?" Mike asked. Mr. Harris nodded. "Yes, he's still here. His office is on the 12th floor. If you'd like, I can arrange for you to speak with him." They agreed, and Mr. Harris arranged for them to meet John Smith. As they made their way to the 12th floor, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer to uncovering a crucial piece of the puzzle. The office on the 12th floor was pristine, with modern furnishings and a professional ambience. John Smith, a tall man with a serious expression, greeted them as they entered. He appeared cautious but willing to cooperate. Mike introduced themselves and explained the situation. We're investigating a case involving someone who might have been seen in this building. We need to know if you've seen anything unusual or if you have any information that could help us." John Smith listened intently, his eyes narrowing as he considered their request. "I haven't seen anything unusual, but I can check my records and see if there's anything that stands out." Sarah and Mike waited while John Smith reviewed his records. The tension in the room was palpable, each moment stretching into what felt like an eternity. Finally, John Smith looked up, his expression thoughtful. "I did have a visitor recently who was looking for information. He didn't leave a name, but he seemed very interested in the building's history and tenants." Sarah's heart raced. This could be the breakthrough they needed. "Do you know when this visitor came, or if there were any specific details about his visit?" John Smith shook his head. "I'm afraid I don't have any specific details, but I'll provide you with the visitor logs and any other information I have." As Sarah and Mike reviewed the visitor logs, they found several entries that matched the timeline of the shadowy figure seen in the videos. The visitor logs included a name, Richard Caldwell, a name that had not appeared before in their investigation. "This could be a lead," Mike said, his voice filled with renewed energy. "We need to find out more about Richard Caldwell and see if he's connected to Tom's case." Sarah agreed, her mind racing with possibilities. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and she felt a renewed sense of determination to uncover the truth. As they left the office building, Sarah felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. The investigation was progressing, but the road ahead was still fraught with uncertainty. With each new clue, the mystery deepened, but Sarah was more committed than ever to finding answers. Chapter 4. Uncovering Secrets. The name Richard Caldwell felt like a breakthrough in the case, and Sarah and Mike wasted no time in pursuing it. They left the office building and headed to a nearby cafe to discuss their next steps. The cafe, a small and cozy place, offered a brief respite from the intense investigation. As they sipped their coffee, Mike spread out the visitor logs on the table. Sarah scanned the entries, her mind working overtime to piece together any connections. The name Richard Caldwell stood out, but there were no additional details in the logs to indicate his purpose or affiliations. "Richard Caldwell," Sarah said thoughtfully. "We need to dig deeper into who he is and what he might be involved in." Mike nodded in agreement. "I'll start by checking public records and any available background information. You might want to follow up with any potential leads related to his activities or connections." After their brief meeting, Sarah set off to investigate Richard Caldwell. She began by searching online for any publicly available information. Caldwell was a common name, but several records indicated that there was a prominent individual by that name involved in various business ventures. Sarah focused on a particular Richard Caldwell who was linked to several high-profile investments and real estate projects. The information she found painted a picture of a successful businessman with connections to influential figures in the city. Meanwhile, Mike delved into public records and databases to find more specific details. After several hours of searching, he found that Richard Caldwell had a history of legal disputes and business dealings that could potentially intersect with their investigation. Sarah and Mike reconvened at the cafe in the late afternoon, their faces reflecting the exhaustion and determination of their efforts. "I found some interesting information about Caldwell," Sarah said, showing Mike a printout of a news article. "It seems he's involved in several high-stakes real estate projects, including some that are rumored to have connections to organized crime." Mike reviewed the article and nodded. "That fits with what I found. Caldwell has been in and out of legal troubles, and there are allegations of shady dealings. If Tom's disappearance is linked to Caldwell, it could be part of a larger criminal scheme." They decided to follow up on Caldwell's current activities, which led them to his office. The building was located in a prestigious part of the city, and the lobby was sleek and modern, reflecting Caldwell's wealth and influence. Sarah and Mike made their way to the receptionist's desk, explaining their investigation and requesting to speak with Richard Caldwell. The receptionist, a young woman with a professional demeanor, informed them that Caldwell was out of the office but would return later in the day. Frustrated but not deterred, Sarah and Mike decided to wait. They took seats in the lobby and observed the comings and goings of the building. After a short wait, Caldwell's assistant, a sharply dressed woman named Julia, approached them. "I've been informed that Mr. Caldwell is aware of your visit," Julia said. "He'll be back in an hour. If you'd like, I can arrange a meeting for you." Sarah and Mike agreed, and Julia set up a meeting for them with Caldwell. They waited in the lobby, their anticipation growing with each passing minute. When Caldwell finally arrived, he greeted them with a polite but guarded demeanor. He was a tall man in his early 50s, with a commanding presence and an air of confidence. "Mr. Caldwell," Sarah said, extending her hand, "we're investigating a case involving several recent incidents, and we believe you might have information that could be relevant." Caldwell's expression remained neutral as he shook her hand. "I see. I'm not sure what I can provide, but I'll do my best to assist." They followed Caldwell to his office, which was decorated with opulent furnishings and expensive artwork. Caldwell took a seat behind his desk, and Sarah and Mike sat across from him, ready to begin the interview. "We understand that you've been involved in several high-profile projects and legal disputes," Mike said. "We're looking into a disappearance case that we believe might be connected to some of your recent activities. Can you provide any information about recent visitors or associates who might be relevant?" Caldwell's demeanor remained calm, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I'm afraid I don't have much to offer. I'm a businessman, and while I interact with many people, I don't keep track of their personal matters." Sarah pressed on, determined to uncover any potential links. "We have reason to believe that someone with connections to organized crime might be involved. Have you had any recent dealings or meetings that could be related?" Caldwell's expression hardened slightly. "I don't involve myself in criminal activities, and I'm not aware of any connections to organized crime. If you have specific names or details, I can check my records." Sarah and Mike reviewed their findings and mentioned the name Richard Caldwell from the visitor logs, hoping to provoke a reaction. Caldwell's demeanor shifted slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I don't know who that is," Caldwell said firmly. "If there's nothing else, I have other meetings to attend." Sarah and Mike concluded their meeting with Caldwell, feeling a mixture of frustration and cautious optimism. While Caldwell had been evasive, the interview had provided some insights and led them to consider further avenues of investigation. As they left Caldwell's office, Sarah reflected on the day's developments. They had uncovered new leads and connections, but the full scope of the conspiracy remained elusive. The investigation was far from over, and Sarah knew that each new clue would bring them closer to the truth. They decided to regroup and analyze the information they had gathered. With each piece of the puzzle falling into place, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, but she was determined to uncover the truth about Tom's disappearance and bring those responsible to justice. Chapter 4. The Enigmatic Richard Caldwell. Sarah and Mike spent the following day digging into Richard Caldwell's background. His name appeared in the visitor logs, but there was little else to go on. They started by searching online for any information that could provide insight into Caldwell's identity and activities. The search results revealed that Richard Caldwell was a relatively common name, with several individuals across various professions and locations. However, a deeper dive uncovered a more relevant lead: a Richard Caldwell associated with a small but reputable security consulting firm. The firm, Caldwell and Associates, specialized in high-level security and surveillance, which aligned with the meticulous nature of the footage they had seen. They decided to pay a visit to Caldwell and Associates, hoping to find out more about this specific Richard Caldwell and his activities. The firm's office was located in a sleek, modern building in the heart of the city's financial district. As they approached, Sarah noticed the building's imposing presence, with its glass facade reflecting the surrounding skyscrapers. Inside, The lobby was polished and sophisticated, with high ceilings and contemporary decor. A receptionist greeted them and informed them that Richard Caldwell was in a meeting but would be available shortly. They took a seat and waited, their anticipation growing with each passing minute. When Richard Caldwell finally appeared, he was a tall, distinguished man in his early 40s, with a sharp suit and an air of confidence. He greeted them with a polite smile and gestured for them to follow him to his office. As they walked through the office, Sarah observed the high-tech security systems and surveillance equipment that lined the walls. The firm's reputation for cutting-edge technology was evident in every detail. In his office, Richard Caldwell took a seat behind his desk and motioned for Sarah and Mike to do the same. "How can I help you?" he asked, his tone professional but slightly guarded. Mike introduced themselves and explained that they were investigating a case related to Tom's disappearance. "We've come across your name in our research and we're hoping to learn more about your activities, particularly if you've had any involvement with someone connected to this case." Richard Caldwell's expression remained composed, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "I see. Well, I don't have any information about your specific case, but I can provide some background on my work and recent clients." He proceeded to give them a brief overview of Caldwell and Associates services, which included security consulting, surveillance, and risk management. Caldwell emphasized that his firm worked with various clients, including high-profile individuals and corporations, to ensure their safety and confidentiality. As the conversation progressed, Sarah and Mike decided to be more direct. "We've come across some surveillance footage that seems to show someone who may have been involved with your firm. We're trying to determine if there's a connection between this person and our case." Richard Caldwell's demeanor remained measured, but he leaned forward slightly. "Do you have any details about the footage or the individual in question?" Sarah showed him the video stills they had from the USB drive. Caldwell studied them carefully, his eyes narrowing as he examined the images. "I don't recognize this person," he said finally. "However, we do provide surveillance services, and it's possible that someone from our firm could have been involved. I'll need to check our records to see if there's any information related to this individual." He excused himself to retrieve the records, leaving Sarah and Mike to discuss their next steps. The office was filled with the hum of computers and the quiet murmur of employees working diligently. The atmosphere was one of professionalism and efficiency, which contrasted sharply with the tense situation Sarah and Mike found themselves in. When Richard Caldwell returned, he handed them a folder with records of recent clients and projects. "I've reviewed our records, and I don't see any direct connection to this individual. However, I'll keep an eye out and let you know if anything comes up." Sarah and Mike thanked Caldwell for his time and left the office with the folder in hand. As they reviewed the documents, they noticed a few entries related to security upgrades and surveillance installations, but nothing that immediately connected to Tom's case. "Caldwell seemed genuine," Mike said, his voice thoughtful. "But I have a feeling that there's more to this than he's letting on. We should keep investigating and see if there are any other leads related to his firm." Sarah agreed. "We also need to follow up on the visitor logs and see if we can find more information about Richard Caldwell's recent activities." They decided to visit the city's records office to access additional information about Caldwell and Associates and any relevant permits or licenses. The records office was located in a nondescript building, and the process of accessing public records was slow and bureaucratic. After several hours of sifting through documents, Sarah and Mike found a few interesting details. Caldwell and Associates had recently applied for a special permit related to a high-profile security project, but the details of the project were classified. The permit was issued just weeks before Tom's disappearance. "This could be significant," Sarah said, her eyes scanning the document. "The timing of the permit aligns with the timeline of the case. We need to find out more about this project and see if it's connected to Tom's disappearance." Mike nodded in agreement. "Let's see if we can track down more information about the project and any potential connections to the individuals involved." As they left the records office, Sarah felt a renewed sense of determination. The investigation was evolving, with new leads emerging and connections starting to form. The search for Tom was far from over, but with each clue, they were inching closer to the truth. Chapter 5. The Secret Project. The investigation took a new turn as Sarah and Mike delved deeper into the classified security project connected to Caldwell and Associates. The details were shrouded in secrecy, and accessing further information required navigating through layers of bureaucracy and red tape. Their first step was to contact the city's planning department to request information on any high-profile projects involving security upgrades or installations. They learned that the project in question was linked to a newly constructed luxury residential building on the outskirts of the city. The building was known for its state-of-the-art security features and exclusive clientele, which made it a prime candidate for the type of work Caldwell and Associates specialized in. Sarah and Mike decided to visit the construction site to gather more information. The building was an impressive structure, with its modern design and extensive security measures evident even from the outside. High fences, security cameras, and guarded entrances spoke volumes about the level of security in place.
At the entrance, they encountered a security guard who was initially hesitant to let them in. However, after explaining their investigation and showing their credentials, the guard reluctantly allowed them access to the building site. Inside, the construction was nearing completion, with workers busy finishing the final touches. The site manager, a middle-aged man named Tom Reynolds, greeted them and agreed to provide information about the security project. "We've had Caldwell and Associates working on this project for several months," Reynolds said as he led them through the building. "They've installed a comprehensive security system, including surveillance cameras, motion detectors, and secure access points." Sarah and Mike followed Reynolds as he showed them various aspects of the security system. Everything was meticulously designed, with advanced technology integrated into the building's infrastructure. Reynolds pointed out key features, including a high-tech control room that monitored all security activity. "The control room is where all the surveillance footage is monitored," Reynolds explained. "It's equipped with the latest technology to ensure the safety and privacy of the residents." Sarah's curiosity was piqued. "Is it possible to access the surveillance footage or review the records for this building?" Reynolds hesitated for a moment before replying. "The footage is confidential and can only be accessed by authorized personnel. However, I can provide you with information about the installation and any related activities." He handed them a set of documents related to the project, including contracts, specifications, and installation records. Sarah and Mike reviewed the documents carefully, noting that Caldwell and Associates had been involved in several other high-profile projects around the city. As they studied the information, they came across a reference to a high-security vault installed in the building. The vault was designed to store valuable items and sensitive information, adding another layer of intrigue to the project. Why would a residential building need such a high-security vault? Sarah wondered aloud. Mike nodded. "It's unusual for a residential building to have such advanced security features. It suggests that the building might have high-profile residents or important information that needs to be protected." They continued their investigation by contacting local law enforcement to see if there were any recent incidents or reports related to the luxury building. They learned that there had been a recent break-in attempt at the building, but it was thwarted by the security system. The break-in attempt raised more questions than answers. If someone was attempting to gain access to the building's security features, it might be connected to Tom's disappearance. Sarah and Mike needed to find out who was behind the attempt and what their intentions were. Their next move was to review the security records for the building, focusing on any suspicious activity or individuals who might be connected to the case. They requested access to the control room, hoping to uncover more information about the break-in attempt. When they arrived at the control room, they were met by a technician named Lisa Martinez. She was responsible for maintaining the security system and managing the surveillance footage. "I can show you the footage from the time of the break-in attempt," Lisa said, leading them to the control room. "We have detailed recordings of all activities related to the incident." As the footage played, Sarah and Mike watched the attempted break-in unfold. The footage showed a shadowy figure attempting to bypass the security system, but the high-tech equipment successfully thwarted the intrusion. The footage revealed a few crucial details. The figure was wearing dark clothing and a mask, making it difficult to identify them. However, the figure's movements and the timing of the attempt provided valuable clues. "Do you have any records of who might have accessed the building around that time?" Sarah asked. Lisa reviewed the access logs and provided them with a list of individuals who had entered the building during the period of the break-in attempt. The list included several residents and service personnel, but one name stood out: Richard Caldwell. Caldwell was in the building around the time of the incident, Lisa noted. It's possible that he was conducting routine checks or working on the security system. Sarah and Mike exchanged glances. "We need to speak with Caldwell again and ask him about his activities during that time," Mike said. They returned to Caldwell and Associates and requested another meeting with Richard Caldwell. When they arrived, Caldwell greeted them with a mixture of surprise and curiosity.
"We've reviewed the security footage and access logs," Sarah said, getting straight to the point. "We noticed that you were in the building around the time of a recent break-in attempt. Can you explain your presence there and provide any details about your activities?" Richard Caldwell's expression remained composed, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. "I was conducting a routine inspection of the security system. It's standard procedure for us to ensure that everything is functioning properly." He provided a detailed account of his activities, which seemed to align with the records. However, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Caldwell's involvement in the project and the timing of his visit raised more questions about his potential connection to Tom's case. As they left Caldwell and Associates, Sarah and Mike discussed their next steps. They needed to continue their investigation and follow up on any new leads related to the high-security vault and the break-in attempt. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but the full picture remained elusive. Chapter 6. The Vault's Secrets. The investigation into the luxury residential building and the high-security vault revealed a series of intriguing details. Sarah and Mike were convinced that the vault and its contents held the key to unraveling the mystery behind Tom's disappearance. They needed to delve deeper into the vault's purpose and its connection to the case. Their first step was to gather more information about the vault's design and security features. They contacted the construction firm responsible for the building's development and requested access to the vault's specifications and security measures. The firm's representative, an architect named Susan Clark, agreed to meet with them and provide the requested details. Susan Clark was knowledgeable about the building's design and the high-security vault. She met with Sarah and Mike at her office and handed them a detailed blueprint of the vault's construction. The vault is designed to withstand various security breaches and unauthorized access, Susan explained as she reviewed the blueprint. It features reinforced walls, advanced locking mechanisms, and biometric access controls. The security system is integrated with the building's overall security infrastructure. Sarah and Mike studied the blueprint, noting the intricate details of the vault's construction. The advanced security features included multiple layers of protection, making it nearly impenetrable. The blueprint also indicated that the vault was equipped with an alarm system that would trigger if tampered with. "This is impressive technology," Mike remarked, "but it also raises questions about why such a high level of security is needed for a residential building." Susan shrugged. The vault was requested by a client who wanted to ensure the safety of valuable items and sensitive information. It's not uncommon for high-profile individuals to have such security measures in place. With the blueprint in hand, Sarah and Mike decided to investigate the contents of the vault. They requested access to the building's security records to identify any suspicious activity related to the vault. The records revealed that the vault had been accessed several times, but the logs did not indicate any unusual behavior. Sarah and Mike then turned their attention to the list of individuals who had access to the vault. They discovered that a small number of trusted personnel, including Richard Caldwell, had been authorized to enter the vault. They decided to interview some of these personnel to gather more information. Their first interview was with a security guard named Kevin Parker, who had been responsible for monitoring the vault's security. Kevin Parker was a burly man with a no-nonsense attitude. When Sarah and Mike questioned him about the vault and any unusual activity, he seemed cautious but cooperative. "I don't recall anything out of the ordinary," Kevin said. "The vault is heavily monitored, and all access is logged. If there was anything suspicious, it would be recorded in the logs." Sarah and Mike reviewed the access logs again, but they didn't find any additional clues. They decided to interview other personnel who had access to the vault, including the maintenance staff and security technicians. One of the technicians, a young woman named Emily Rhodes, provided some useful information. She mentioned that she had recently performed maintenance work on the vault's alarm system and noted that the system had been functioning normally. "I didn't notice anything unusual during my work," Emily said. "The system was fully operational, and there were no signs of tampering." Sarah and Mike continued their investigation by exploring the possibility that the vault's contents might be connected to Tom's disappearance. They considered the possibility that the vault might hold evidence or clues related to the case. To pursue this line of inquiry, they needed to obtain a warrant to search the vault. They contacted the local authorities and presented their findings, emphasizing the potential connection between the vault and Tom's case. After some deliberation, the authorities granted them permission to search the vault. The following day, Sarah and Mike arrived at the luxury building with a team of investigators. They were granted access to the vault, and the team carefully examined its contents. The vault was meticulously organized, with several shelves holding various items. There were documents, electronic devices, and personal belongings, but nothing immediately stood out as being connected to Tom's disappearance. Sarah and Mike carefully examined the documents and electronic devices, looking for any clues or connections to the case. They found a few files related to high-profile clients and security protocols, but nothing that directly linked to Tom. As they continued their search, they noticed a small, hidden compartment within the vault. It was not listed in the original blueprint and seemed to have been recently added. The compartment was locked with a different type of security mechanism. Sarah and Mike managed to open the hidden compartment, revealing a stack of documents and a sealed envelope. The documents appeared to be financial records, while the envelope was labeled with the name Jonathan Hayes. They recognized the name from their previous research. Jonathan Hayes was a wealthy businessman with connections to several high-profile security firms. The sealed envelope was a potential lead that needed to be investigated further. Sarah and Mike decided to follow up on Jonathan Hayes and his connection to the vault. They contacted Hayes and requested an interview to discuss his involvement with the high-security project and any potential links to Tom's disappearance. As they prepared for the interview, Sarah and Mike felt a renewed sense of determination. The hidden compartment in the vault had provided them with a valuable lead, and they were eager to uncover the truth behind Jonathan Hayes and his connection to the case. Chapter 7. The Shadowy Figure. Sarah and Mike were keenly aware that the discovery of Jonathan Hayes' name in the vault's hidden compartment was a significant breakthrough. They prepared for their upcoming interview with Hayes, hoping that it would shed light on his connection to the case and provide more clues about Tom's disappearance. They arrived at Hayes' luxurious office, located in one of the city's most prestigious buildings. Hayes' office was as impressive as expected, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The decor was elegant, reflecting Hayes' wealth and influence. Jonathan Hayes, a well-dressed man in his late 40s, greeted them with a firm handshake. He had a confident demeanor, and his eyes held a sharp, calculating look. Sarah and Mike introduced themselves and explained the purpose of their visit. "We're investigating a case that involves a high-security project and a recent break-in attempt," Sarah said. "We came across your name in connection with the project and the vault. We'd like to understand your involvement and any relevant information you might have." Hayes appeared composed but slightly guarded. "I'm familiar with the project," he said. "I was one of the investors and had some involvement in its development. However, I don't see how my involvement could be directly related to the case you're investigating." Sarah and Mike began their questioning, focusing on Hayes' connection to the vault and any potential links to Tom's disappearance. They asked about his role in the project and whether he had any knowledge of unusual activity or security breaches. "I was involved in the early stages of the project," Hayes explained. "My investment was intended to ensure that the building met the highest security standards. I don't have direct knowledge of the day-to-day operations or any specific incidents." Despite his calm demeanor, Sarah and Mike sensed that Hayes might be withholding information. They pressed further, asking about his interactions with Richard Caldwell and any knowledge he had of recent events related to the building. Hayes paused before responding. "I had some discussions with Caldwell about the project, but I didn't get involved in the specifics of the security system. My interest was primarily financial." Sarah and Mike thanked Hayes for his time and left his office, feeling that they had not yet uncovered the full extent of his involvement. They decided to follow up on the sealed envelope they had found in the vault, hoping it would provide more insight into Hayes' connection to the case. Back at their office, Sarah and Mike carefully examined the envelope. Inside, they found a series of documents and a handwritten note. The documents included financial records, contracts, and correspondence related to the high-security project. The handwritten note was addressed to Jonathan Hayes and contained a cryptic message: "The truth lies hidden in the shadows. Follow the trail to uncover the secrets." The message was ambiguous, but it suggested that there was more to uncover beyond what Hayes had revealed. Sarah and Mike decided to investigate the documents further, looking for any clues or connections that might lead them to the truth. As they reviewed the financial records, they noticed several large transactions and payments made to various entities. Some of these transactions were labeled as consulting fees or security enhancements, but there were also several payments to an unnamed recipient. The payments to the unnamed recipient raised red flags. Sarah and Mike hypothesized that this individual might be connected to the case or have information about the high-security project. They decided to trace the payments and identify the recipient. Their investigation led them to a company called Shadow Security Solutions, which had received several of the payments. The company specialized in advanced security systems and had a reputation for handling high-profile projects. Sarah and Mike reached out to Shadow Security Solutions and requested information about their involvement with the high-security project. They were informed that the company had provided specialized consulting services and equipment for the project. The contact person at Shadow Security Solutions was a man named Richard Malone. Sarah and Mike arranged a meeting with Malone to discuss the company's involvement and any relevant information about the project. When they met with Malone, he was cooperative but cautious. He explained that Shadow Security Solutions had been hired to provide additional security features and consulting services for the project. "Our role was to enhance the existing security system and ensure it met the highest standards," Malone said. "We provided advanced equipment and technical support, but we didn't have direct involvement in the day-to-day operations." Sarah and Mike asked Malone about any unusual activity or interactions with other individuals involved in the project. Malone mentioned that there had been occasional disagreements and disputes over the project's specifications and security measures, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. The information provided by Malone was useful but did not immediately resolve the case. Sarah and Mike realized that they needed to continue following the trail of clues and investigate further. As they left Shadow Security Solutions, they discussed their next steps. They planned to revisit Jonathan Hayes and confront him with the new information they had uncovered. They also intended to explore the possibility that the unnamed recipient of the payments might be a key figure in the case. The investigation was becoming increasingly complex, and Sarah and Mike knew that they were getting closer to uncovering the truth behind Tom's disappearance. They were determined to follow every lead and piece together the puzzle, no matter how elusive the answers might be. Chapter 8. The Hidden Agenda. Sarah and Mike were determined to get to the bottom of the case. Their investigation had uncovered a series of clues, but they needed to connect the dots to understand the full picture. The next step was to revisit Jonathan Hayes and confront him with the new information they had gathered. They arranged another meeting with Hayes, who appeared somewhat uneasy upon their arrival. Sarah and Mike presented the documents from the vault and the handwritten note, pressing him for explanations. "We've discovered that there were several payments made to a company called Shadow Security Solutions," Sarah began. "We've also found a note suggesting that the truth is hidden in the shadows. Can you explain these findings?" Hayes seemed taken aback by the direct approach. He hesitated before responding. "I see you've been doing your homework. I can't deny that I was involved with Shadow Security Solutions, but I assure you, it was all above board." Mike leaned forward, scrutinizing Hayes. "We need more than assurances. The payments and the note suggest there might be more to this than just financial transactions. What exactly was your role in this?" Hayes sighed and rubbed his temples. "All right, I'll be honest. The project had several layers of complexity, and Shadow Security Solutions was brought in to address some of the more challenging aspects of the security system. My involvement was primarily to oversee the financial side of things and to ensure that everything was in place as per the contract." Sarah and Mike continued their questioning, focusing on Hayes' interactions with other key figures and any potential conflicts or issues that might have arisen. Hayes revealed that there had been some disagreements between the project's stakeholders and the security consultants, but nothing that he considered significant. As the meeting concluded, Sarah and Mike were left with more questions than answers. They decided to pursue the lead about the unnamed recipient of the payments, hoping to uncover more information about this mysterious individual. Their next step was to trace the payments further and identify the individual or entity receiving them. They reached out to their contacts in financial institutions and obtained additional details about the transactions. The payments were routed through a series of shell companies, making it difficult to identify the ultimate recipient. However, Sarah and Mike managed to pinpoint one of the companies involved, Apex Investments. They contacted Apex Investments and requested information about their financial dealings. The company's representative, a woman named Laura Bennett, was initially hesitant but eventually agreed to provide information. "We handled several transactions related to the project," Laura explained. "However, due to client confidentiality, I can't disclose specific details about the recipients or the nature of the transactions." Sarah and Mike pressed Laura for more information, emphasizing the importance of their investigation. Laura eventually revealed that the payments were directed to a private account controlled by a person named Victor Kane. Victor Kane was not a well-known figure, but his name appeared frequently in the financial records associated with the project. Sarah and Mike decided to investigate further, hoping that Kane's background might provide additional insights into the case. They conducted a background check on Victor Kane and discovered that he had a history of involvement in various business ventures, some of which were linked to high-profile clients and security projects. Kane's background suggested that he might have had a role in the project's security and financial arrangements. Sarah and Mike arranged to meet with Victor Kane and discuss his involvement. They hoped that he would be able to provide more information about the project and any connections to Tom's disappearance. When they met with Kane, he was a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor. He welcomed them into his office and listened attentively as they presented their questions. "I understand that you're investigating the high-security project," Kane said. "I was involved in the financial aspects and some of the consulting work. What specifically would you like to know?" Sarah and Mike asked Kane about his role in the project and any interactions he had with other key figures, including Jonathan Hayes and Shadow Security Solutions. Kane was cooperative but maintained a level of secrecy about certain aspects of his work. "I handled financial transactions and provided consulting services," Kane explained. "I'm not directly involved in the day-to-day operations or the security system itself. My role was more focused on financial management and oversight." Despite Kane's guarded responses, Sarah and Mike felt that they were getting closer to understanding the full scope of the case. They decided to follow up on the connections between Kane, Hayes, and the High Security Project, looking for any additional evidence or clues that might help resolve the mystery. The investigation was reaching a critical point, and Sarah and Mike knew that they needed to remain vigilant. They continued to piece together the information and pursued every lead, determined to uncover the truth behind Tom's disappearance and the hidden agenda behind the High Security Project. Chapter 9. The Final Revelation. Sarah and Mike had gathered substantial evidence, but they knew the final piece of the puzzle was still missing. They revisited their findings, focusing on the connections between Victor Kane, Jonathan Hayes, and the High Security Project. Their investigation had revealed a complex web of financial transactions and hidden agendas, but they needed to tie everything together. They decided to confront Hayes one last time, armed with the information they had uncovered. Hayes agreed to meet with them at a private location, away from the prying eyes of the public and media. When they arrived, Hayes appeared visibly anxious. "I assume you've come to a conclusion about the case," he said, trying to maintain his composure. Sarah and Mike presented their findings, including the details about Victor Kane's role and the hidden financial transactions. Hayes listened intently, his expression shifting from calm to troubled as they spoke. "Look," Hayes said finally, "I never intended for any of this to get so out of hand. My involvement was meant to be discreet, but it's clear that things have spiraled beyond what I anticipated." Mike pressed further. "What do you mean by things spiraling? We need the full truth." Hayes sighed deeply. Victor Kane had been working on several high-stakes projects, and his methods were unorthodox. He had connections with various underground networks and used these connections to manipulate financial dealings and project outcomes. Sarah and Mike exchanged glances. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the case. "Why was Kane involved in this particular project?" Sarah asked. "What was his ultimate goal?" Hayes hesitated before responding. Kane was hired to ensure the project's success, but he had his own agenda. He used his influence to divert funds and resources for his personal gain. The High Security Project was a front for a much larger scheme involving illegal activities and hidden investments. Sarah and Mike listened carefully as Hayes continued. The project was a cover for Kane's operations. He used the high security systems to conceal his illegal dealings and avoid detection. My role was limited to overseeing the financial aspects, but I was unaware of the full extent of his operations. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. Sarah and Mike realized that the High Security Project was a front for a much broader criminal enterprise, with Kane orchestrating the scheme from behind the scenes. With this new understanding, Sarah and Mike knew they needed to act swiftly. They gathered their evidence and prepared to take action against Victor Kane and his network. Their investigation had reached a critical juncture, and they were determined to see it through to the end. They coordinated with law enforcement agencies and shared their findings, setting the stage for a comprehensive operation to dismantle Kane's criminal network. The evidence was compelling, and they were confident that the operation would yield significant results. As they prepared for the final phase of their investigation, Sarah and Mike reflected on the journey they had undertaken. The case had been challenging and complex, but their perseverance and teamwork had brought them closer to the truth. The resolution of the case was imminent, and they were ready to face whatever came next. They had uncovered the hidden agenda behind the High Security Project and brought to light the criminal activities that had been concealed for so long. Their work was far from over, but they knew they had made significant progress. The truth was out, and justice was on the horizon. Sarah and Mike were committed to seeing the case through to its conclusion, ensuring that those responsible were held accountable for their actions. The end. If you enjoyed our story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.